We're ready? Okay, great. Welcome everyone to the June 15th, 2026 meeting of the Housing and Homelessness Committee. My name is Alec Militic and I am the chair of the committee. Tonight we are joined by Community Coordinator Brian Lafferty. The meeting is called to order at 6:33 p.m. As a reminder, New York State law requires all committee members who are not able to attend the meeting in person to have their cameras on and their first and last names displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. Members of the public who are attending virtually, you may raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A features of Zoom. Members of the public who are here in person, you may raise any questions that you have by raising your hand. If there is time following the committee's discussion, we will field questions from the public. Seeing none. We will need a volunteer to take minutes tonight. If you are able to take minutes, please let us know. The minutes will be pretty easy this month because it's a light agenda for what it's worth.
I'll go again.
You go again, really? Okay. Thank you, James. Appreciate it. So James has volunteered to take minutes. We will now take attendance by roll call. Brian Lafferty will conduct the roll call.
Thanks, Al. Committee members, when I call your name, please indicate that you're present. Joan Beck.
Here.
Liz Bird.
Present.
Thank you. Eric Goldberg. Sandra Leptoff is not attending this evening. Alec Militek.
Present.
Thank you. Rich Smith.
Present.
Thank you. Steve Perez.
Present.
Thank you. Samir Thanadar. Samir. James Vera.
Present.
Jerry Weinstein.
Present.
And Shuya Zhang.
Present.
Thank you.
And Samir is here very late. Some time.
Just in time.
We've got one. 9 of 11 present. We have it.
Great. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and is reflected on the screen before you. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, please raise your hand. So I would actually like to strike from the agenda item number 2. I had previously included it because I was unsure whether or not we would need to continue that discussion since we didn't come to a resolution last month, but since we voted on the resolution last week related to the shelter site, I think for this evening, if the committee agrees, we can perhaps strike it as an agenda item and perhaps discuss it as necessary with HPD or together as a committee if we so choose. But I think dedicating it as an agenda item is not necessary. Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, so then the amended agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. The minutes from the April 20th and May 18th meetings are being reviewed. They will be distributed when ready. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe a few ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. Committee members who are here in person, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand and I will identify you so you may speak. Committee members unable to attend in person, if you have a question about committee business, you may raise your hand through Zoom and I will identify you so you may speak. All committee members, it is extremely important that only one person speak at a time so that each member of the public watching at home can understand what is being said by each committee member. The chat function for committee business, for committee members present via Zoom should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you are having or to state in writing information that was already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. And so with that, we are very happy this evening to be joined by members from HPD. They're going to talk to us about the agency and about how their role affects housing throughout the city, and hopefully can answer some of our questions that we shared ahead of time and any questions that might arise with this presentation. So HPD, you have the floor. We have a short agenda this evening, so feel free to take up as much time as you need, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Great, thank you, Chair. Hi, everyone. My name is Joy Reeser. I'm the Director of Manhattan Planning at the Department of Housing Preservation and Development, or HPD. We really appreciate you having us all out tonight to talk about affordable housing. My whole team is here. There's 4 of us, and our team is responsible for bringing city-owned sites in Manhattan specifically through the public approvals process in order to develop them into 100% affordable housing buildings. So our team really does just a small piece of the overall work that our agency handles. And we'll cover a lot of that. We have about a 20-minute presentation. And then we can definitely get into some of the questions that you sent along, and thank you for those. And then anything else that comes up. But I will let the rest of my team introduce themselves, and then we can jump in. Audrey, do you want to start?
Sure. Thank you, Joy. Hi, everyone. My name is Audrey Wachs. I'm a senior borough planner on the Manhattan planning team. I'll pass the mic to Melanie.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Melanie Rodrigo. I'm a Manhattan Borough Planner here at HPD, and I can pass it on to Zach.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us here. My name is Zach Korash. I am a Manhattan Borough Planner, and I believe I will pass the mic back to Joy.
Sure. And yeah, we can get the presentation pulled up and get right into it. Okay. I'm not able to see the presentation, but can others see it?
Not yet.
Okay, we'll give it a second. Maybe we can cancel. Okay, now it's
There it
showing.
is.
Perfect. All right. Great. So thank you again for having us. We're going to go through what we call our introduction to affordable housing. We can go to the next slide. And our agenda for tonight is, I think most of you are probably pretty familiar with who HPD is, what HPD is, but we'll get into some of that background, talk about New York City's housing crises, how the city is working to address those crises, discuss different types of affordable housing that the city builds, and then talk about some resources and get into some Q&A. And we're happy to go through the questions that you provided at that point. I think some of the questions that you asked could be answered through the presentation, but if anything else comes up, we can certainly talk about that. And I'll just ask you to hold those until the end. We have a lot to cover tonight, but happy to take those. But we can go to the next slide. All right, so what is HPD? So next slide, HPD ensures housing quality by enforcing the city's maintenance code. We do a lot of different things, but that's a big piece of it. And last year alone, HPD conducted 746,000 inspections and issued 879,000 violations. Additionally, we preserve existing affordable housing and create new affordable housing. So in exchange for maintaining affordability of homes, we provide financing and incentives for owners of older buildings with affordable units. And we also finance on public land and private land as well. And you can see some of those numbers since 2014. We've developed 120,000 new affordable homes and preserved 184 existing affordable units. In addition to that, we also partner with communities on comprehensive planning with the aim of stabilizing and strengthening neighborhoods to ensure that they're diverse and livable. And we can go to the next slide, and I'll hand it over to Audrey.
Thank you, Joy. So before we get into the specifics of some city housing initiatives and affordable housing, I'm going to talk about the impetus for these interventions, which is our multiple overlapping housing crises. Next slide. These issues can be summarized in one sentence. Most New Yorkers struggle to afford an insufficient amount of poorly maintained housing in an ever smaller collection of neighborhoods. Next slide. Let's talk about that first part, the high housing cost. Almost 70% of New Yorkers rent, and of those, almost half are rent burden, which is defined as spending more than 30% or more of one's household income on rent. Moreover, around 30% of New Yorkers are severely rent burdened, meaning they spend more than half of their income on rent. As you can see in the chart here, rent burden is particularly prevalent for households making less than $100,000 a year. Next slide. The New York City median household income is $70,000 a year. Median rent and median income results in rent burden, as the rightmost chart shows. CB6 has a median income that's almost double the city-wide median income, and I'm going to paraphrase your latest statement of needs here. 1 in 5 residents in CB6 is a senior, and almost 10% live below the poverty line. So that income figure masks the very real need for access to affordable housing, homelessness, and general social services. Next slide. In fact, for about 45% of CD6 renters are rent burdened in a neighborhood with a 2024 median rent of around $3,900. Next slide. Not only are housing costs too high, but we're not building enough homes. As you can see here, housing production spiked in the 1920s and 50s and 60s to accommodate a growing population. Next slide. But today, population growth far outpaces housing production. Next slide. Not only that, there is a national and a local trend towards smaller household sizes, which means that we need more units overall. At the same time, rising costs, limited vacant land, zoning, and opposition to new housing in many neighborhoods limits housing construction. Nick. The housing that does exist is old and it is expensive to maintain. In New York City, almost about half of our rental housing stock was built before 1952, and a significant amount of that was built before 1939. For example, it costs about $1,200 a month at minimum for building owners to maintain a rent-stabilized apartment. Many low-income tenants can't afford rents that cover maintenance costs, and this isn't even touching on the issue of the landlord's intention to profit. Next slide. So we've talked about old housing. So what about new housing? Since in the past decade and a half, about 300,000 new homes have been built in New York City, but they're concentrated in a few neighborhoods. Brooklyn and Queens waterfront, west side of Manhattan, and the South Bronx, as you can see in the dark blue here. Next slide. Affordable housing growth is also uneven. Although around 108,000 new affordable homes have been built since 2014, the neighborhoods in light blue saw no new affordable housing construction, and most new affordable housing was concentrated in neighborhoods, those dark blue areas, that already have large amounts of affordable housing. Next slide. The consequences of these compounding crises are familiar, and they are all around us: increasing homelessness, poor quality housing, overcrowding, and rent burden. I'll pass the mic to Melanie to talk about how the city has been tackling some of these challenges.
Great, thanks, Audrey. So as Audrey mentioned, these are large and complex issues that impact New Yorkers in different ways. And so the outstanding question is, so what is the city doing to address these crises? And so in this section, we'll cover how the city takes a comprehensive approach to address those crises, recognizing that there's no single solution. Instead, the city works across multiple fronts. And this can look like outreach and education for homeowners, protections for the most vulnerable tenants, and maintaining or increasing our supply of affordable housing through preservation and construction. And so what are we doing to protect tenants to stay in their homes? Well, the city has several programs and policies focused on education, legal protection, and financial support. So first, the city makes sure that tenants know their rights, and through resources like the HPD, ABCs of Housing Guide, tenants are informed about key protections, such as the right to safe and habitable housing, protection against harassment, and the legal processes around eviction. By equipping tenants with clear, accessible information, the city empowers residents to advocate for themselves, recognize their rights, or when their rights are being violated, and take action early to stay in their homes. And second, the city strengthened protections against eviction and harassment, and this includes access to housing court support, legal assistance and services. HPD provides resources like the tenant harassment FAQ, and that helps residents understand what qualifies as harassment, what protections they have, and where to go for help. It also connects tenants to city agencies and organizations that can support them. And third, the city provides direct financial support. Programs like emergency rental assistance and rental vouchers help stabilize households, especially for vulnerable populations like seniors and people with disabilities. So together, these efforts are designed to empower tenants, prevent displacement, and keep New Yorkers safely housed. Sorry, my laptop's being slow. I don't see the next slide yet.
I think it's still stuck on the last one. Oh, there we go.
Right, sorry about that. Not only do we want tenants to stay in their homes, we also want to help homeowners remain stable and avoid displacement. So the city offers a range of programs to support owners facing financial strain, scams, or property disrepair. So at the center is the Homeowner Help Desk, a one-stop resource that connects homeowners to legal counseling, foreclosure prevention services, and support to help protect against deed theft and fraud. Home Fix 2.0 provides low or no interest loans to eligible owners of 1 to 4 unit homes, helping them make critical repairs and maintain safe living conditions. And education is also a key strategy, and through resources like the Homeowner Handbook and the HPD ABCs of Housing for Owners, the city helps homeowners understand their responsibilities, avoid common risks, and navigate available programs. Also, in addition, homeowner resource fairs bring these services directly into communities. And so one program we like to highlight in addressing New York City's housing crisis is HPD's Partners in Preservation, led by a team within the Office of Neighborhood Strategies here at HPD. This initiative focuses on proactive tenant outreach and individual counseling to tenants, helping residents understand their rights, access resources, and stabilize their housing before issues escalate into eviction or displacement. Even in its early stages, the program proved highly effective. And despite COVID limiting in-person organizing, the pilot still reached thousands of tenants and helped form 90 new tenant associations, building long-term organizing capacity in communities where displacement risk is high. And because of this success, HPD expanded Partners in Preservation to additional neighborhoods that started in fall of 2024. And so this work is part of a broader citywide approach that combines prevention with direct support. Alongside the tenant organizing, the city has also provided rental assistance, and we also have vouchers for different kinds of tenants, like rent supplements for families with children who receive cash assistance and have lost their housing, or for some eligible seniors in certain housing developments. And so preservation financing is one of the city's most important tools for addressing New York City's housing crisis by keeping existing homes affordable, stable, and safe for long-term residents. And so since 2014, the city has preserved over 184,000 affordable homes across the city. Notably, about half of those homes serve households earning below 50% of the area median income. That's roughly $0 to $76,000 for a family of 3, and that's targeting some of the most cost-burdened New Yorkers. And this is achieved through a combination of low-interest loans and subsidies that support building rehabilitation and ongoing operating costs in exchange for long-term affordability. Instead of letting buildings fall into disrepair or convert to market rate housing, the city invests in stabilizing them for the long term. So an example is 244 Elizabeth Street in Manhattan, which was substantially renovated by the Asian Americans for Equality through HPD's Affordable Neighborhood Cooperative Program. And this type of preservation deal helps tenant cooperatives and nonprofit partners take ownership, reinvest in buildings, and maintain permanent affordability. And so creating new affordable housing, it's an essential part of how the city is addressing the housing crisis alongside preservation and tenant protections. So HPD finances 100% affordable housing on both public and private property by providing financial tools and incentives to property owners in exchange for long-term affordability commitments. And these include subsidies, low-cost financing, and development support that make affordable housing feasible in a high-cost area like the city. And so a major part of this strategy is zoning and tax incentives as administered by HPD, mandatory inclusionary housing, or MIH, and universal affordability preference, or UAP, which require or encourage permanently affordable units in new developments, especially in rezoned and transit accessible areas, both of which we'll break down in more detail in the next slide. But tax incentives have long been one of the most powerful tools for producing affordable housing in the United States. And in the city, they remain central to how new income restricted housing gets built. So in particular, HPD's Article 11 tax exemptions, as well as programs like 421A replaced by 485X that helps projects pencil out in a high cost market area like New York City. And so despite these tools, most new housing development in the city still occurs without HPD involvement. And so as you can see, about 2 out of every 3 homes built since 2014 have been market rate, and many projects proceed as of right, meaning they do not require public review or city council approval as long as they comply with zoning. So just highlighting the zoning incentives that help create permanently affordable housing, specifically mandatory inclusionary housing, and the universal affordability preference Both programs generate income restricted apartments that are permanently affordable and distributed through the city's housing lottery, helping ensure access for a range of income levels across neighborhoods. And so MIH, or the mandatory inclusionary housing, is in specific areas where the city has approved rezonings that significantly increase residential density. And in these areas, developers are required to set aside 20 to 30% of all homes as permanently affordable. UAP is an optional incentive available in all medium and high density residential districts outside MIH areas. And so this allows developers to build additional housing, typically at least 20% increase in a floor area if the added units are permanently affordable or permanently income restricted and affordable, on average to households earning around 60% of the area median income. And so together, MIH and UAP ensure that as the city grows, new development includes income restricted housing, not just market rate units. And so since 2014, the city has supported the creation of over 127,000 new affordable units on both public and private land, which allows HPD to reach a wide range of neighborhoods. And these developments are designed to meet a range of housing needs, including affordable homes for extremely low and moderate income households, seniors, individuals who need supportive services, as well as opportunities for affordable home ownership. And HPD's approach is pairing the capital financing with long-term affordability requirements, ensuring that these homes remain affordable for decades. And an example is the Wish Fish at West 108th Street in the Upper West Side. It's an HPD finance development project that provides affordable senior housing with supportive services, showing how the city delivers both housing and care in one integrated model. So overall, new construction financing is not just about building more housing, it's about building the right types of housing for different needs, using public investment to ensure affordability in a high cost market. And so now I'll pass it over to Zach, who will speak more about affordable housing types.
Thank you, Melanie. Go to the next slide. So as Melanie said, I'm going to walk you through a little bit about what HPD means when we talk about affordable rental housing. Before we get to that, I want to discuss some of the tools that we have to either make or keep housing affordable. Go to the next slide. While housing affordability is always relative to who is renting, there are specific regulatory tools that can keep housing costs lower. First one we have there is income restriction, when a home has income-based eligibility. The basic intent here is to match housing subsidies with the households that need them. Second, we have rent stabilization, which protects households from sudden rent increases. And then last, we have rent burden protection, which means that if a household's income decreases, their rent remains at about 30% of their income. Next slide. So New York City is home to a spectrum of affordable housing types. We've categorized the major types, starting with those that have federal government subsidy, like public housing and housing vouchers. The other end of the spectrum might be surprising to some, unregulated, or you're more familiar with it as market rate housing. While there are no affordability requirements, lots of people live in market rate units that they feel they can afford, so we've included it here. In the middle, we have pre-1974 rent-stabilized apartments, which are unique and government administered, which includes the housing the city finances, as well as those built with zoning or tax incentives. On the left there, you could see that public housing and rental vouchers deploy two of these affordability tools. They're income restricted and households are protected from rent burden. On the far right, as the name implies, unregulated housing is not regulated by any affordability tools. Pre-1974 rent-stabilized housing is interesting as it does include rent increase protections, hence the name, but there are no income requirements and no protections against rent burden. Housing administered by HPD is right in the middle there. with both income restriction and rent regulation, but no rent burden protections. HPD plays a role in the distribution of rental vouchers to thousands of New Yorkers. We also finance government-assisted housing. Go to the next slide. As mentioned earlier, a big part of HPD's role in affordable housing is the financing of 100% affordable buildings on both public and private property around the city. These homes have varying levels of affordability based on our financing programs, which we also call term sheets. These affordability levels determine the rental price of the units and the household income eligible to rent those units. But understanding how the actual rents and eligible incomes are determined requires understanding HUD's income limits. So Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, is a federal agency that creates limits each year to guide the distribution of housing funds across the country. You may be familiar with things like low-income housing tax credits or rental vouchers. I just said income limits, which is probably not something that you've heard before. You're probably more familiar with the term. Next slide. AMI, right? So we've used this a bunch of times in this presentation. For those of you who are not familiar with it, AMI stands for Area Median Income. It's the common shorthand for what are technically max income limits. Contrary to what you may have heard before, New York City's AMIs actually have nothing to do with income. Instead, they are calculated using fair market rents for high housing cost areas like New York City. HUD defines 3 eligible income categories for its subsidies. We have low-income households earning between 51 and 80% AMI, very low-income households earning between 31 and 50% AMI, and then extremely low-income households earning less than 30% AMI. To understand this a little bit better, we'll walk you through our process from conception to construction and leasing so you can see an example of how all this plays out in a real development. For public sites, it all starts with a period of community engagement after we select a site that culminates in a community visioning report that you can see there on the left. We gather input on which populations the community would like to see affordable housing for, rental or home ownership preferences, and income ranges, along with ideals for potential community or commercial spaces. From there, it goes through a competitive process, requesting proposals from developers who respond to a set of goals and guidelines for the site that reflect community priorities. After extensive review, a winning team is designated. Then the project goes through a public approvals process and secures financing before construction. Construction begins, and as it nears completion, affordable homes are made available through the housing lottery. Next slide. So this is an example of a project that went through the process and completed construction in 2024. The Eliza was a partnership with a development team that included community service providers and the New York Public Library to redevelop the Inwood Library in tandem with affordable housing. The lights just shut off on me. This was financed using our extremely low and low income affordability, or ELA program, and included nearly 40,000 square feet of community space. And then here we have an example of how AMI influences rent for a 1-bedroom apartment at the Eliza. Because this development was financed using our ELA program, units were affordable to those making up to 60% AMI. You can see household sizes are used to determine the income limits to ensure relative affordability. As mentioned earlier, these limits are set by HUD and released every year, with HPD using the limits to determine appropriate rents for each development. And with that, I will pass it back over to Joy to close us out.
Awesome. Thanks, Zach. So we just have 2 more slides and we'll quickly recap kind of what we've talked through. So the first thing being that New York City is facing overlapping housing crises, really rooted in high housing costs and very limited supply of low-cost housing. Second thing we talked about is that HPD and many other city agencies are working to address these problems by protecting tenants and creating and preserving affordable housing. And the third thing is a big part of what HPD does is build income-restricted affordable housing, most of which serves households earning less than 80% AMI. And you can see some examples of those projects below. And then our final slide, I'll leave you with some resources. We're also happy to share this deck as well. But we have a variety of resources that we touched on, many of which are here and also can be found through the QR code that Zach put together, really helpful. But with that, we're happy to take any questions. And Chair, let me know if you would like us to start with going through the questions that you've already posed, or how you want to handle that. But thank you so much.
Great, thank you, everyone. I think we can open up the floor while the presentation is still fresh. If anyone has any questions, Jerry.
Howdy, thanks for your presentation. I'm gonna stack two quick things. Free legal rep is currently funded at only 20%. I'm wondering if that's a discussion to increase the monies allocated so that more people can take advantage. And the second question is, I appreciate your Partners in Preservation program and tenant organizing as a concept. I'm one of those people that is the sole surviving stabilized tenant. And I imagine that there are many ones and twos across the city. I'd like to suggest that you create a pilot where you aggregate ones and twos. That's what I got. Thanks.
Thank you. And sorry, I want to clarify, can you repeat your first question again?
Yes, the program for free legal rep, as I understand it, is only funded at 20%.
I could get more information about that, but I am happy to pass along the 2 points that you just raised to our internal folks, because I think those are really excellent.
Sandy has a question.
You mentioned the ELISA. I wondered how long that took to develop. From start to people living in it.
Yeah, so we typically, I think, say the process tends to take about 5 to 8 years in total from having the community visioning workshop, doing the outreach, all the way through construction and move-in. So it does take quite a long time because a lot of these sites in the past have had to go through lengthy ULURP processes. We now have ELURP, so that's helping to speed things along a little bit. But typically about 5 to 8 years for the whole process.
And just one other question, do you have any projects in CB6 right now?
We can check a list. I'm not familiar with any public sites that we're working on currently in CB6, but we can check internally to see what else is going on, what private sites there are.
Thank you.
Shreya?
I also have a question for the partners in preservation. And I just saw your website that you have launched this project in 10 community board districts in Manhattan, but sadly, community board 6 is not included. And can you explain why?
Yeah, we're happy to get more context on that. So we piloted it back around the time of the pandemic, and it was really, really popular. It's taken off quite a bit since then. So now we're in 30 community districts citywide out of 59, so not all, as you pointed out. But it's something of a priority for the administration. I don't know if any of you attended the rental ripoff hearings, but there was a huge focus on tenant organizing, and our commissioner comes from an organizing background. So I don't have any updates to share now, and we can check internally sort of like what the decision was for that, and if there's any possibility of expanding it in the future.
Yes, because I saw that community board 1 and community board 6 are not included, and you have these projects in other community board districts.
We'll look into that. I know we get questions all over Manhattan about affordable housing and the need for more affordable housing, even in areas where median income, like in CB6, is quite high. So we know that there are folks who would really benefit from this program throughout the borough. So let us get you some more information about that.
Steve?
Hi, yes. My question is, can you talk a little bit more about what is HPD's role in deciding what public sites become eligible to be developed into housing? We have a site in our district that we just passed a resolution on last week, which is the 30th Street, a former 30th Street men's shelter, and we're wondering how can that be turned into housing? And what is HPD's role in that process?
I had a feeling this question would come up. Yeah, we have a whole team actually at HPD. Our planning and our pre-development planning and urban design team who actually identifies sites for redevelopment. And we work very closely with City Hall on identifying sites that we feel are most feasible, building in areas that we haven't built in before. And the mayor announced in the block by block plan, and prior to that, his LIFT initiative to really look at different city-owned sites throughout the city to see where we can build more affordable housing. So it's something HPD has been thinking about, but I know is a huge priority of the admin as well, especially for areas that haven't seen a ton of affordable housing development like CV6. So I will ask around internally and see if there's anything we could do with the shelter site, because that seems like a really good opportunity, but I won't make any promises. But yeah, we're definitely always thinking about opportunity sites throughout the city.
I have a question related to that. So in addition to the 30th Street shelter, we also have another site within our community district, the former Mount Sinai Beth Israel site. And so right now, the entitlements for that building do not permit affordable housing. There's no mapped MIH. And I think one of the questions that we asked and we shared with you prior is this also conversion from commercial to housing development and sort of the entitlements process for that and how affordable housing can be provided for conversions. So I guess my question for HPD is, when it comes to public sites like MSBI and even private sites like commercial buildings that are being converted into housing, what role does HPD play in ensuring that these sites can provide affordable housing?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to put anyone on my team on the spot, but folks, feel free to chime in. We do have a program that is working to convert office space into affordable housing, and you might have heard about that. I think we're definitely trying to think big picture about sort of what opportunities exist, especially in Manhattan, where we know that there's very little land to build on. So I think that's another question that I would want to bring internally about what opportunities there would be for that particular site. I'm not as familiar with it, but I think that's a really good flag for us to start thinking about. And yeah, happy to look into that more as well.
Yeah, we're more than happy to continue the conversation with that site. And you said for the office to affordable housing programs, what kind of programs exist? Do you have the names of those?
Yes, I do. I'm scrolling through. It's a number and a letter, but let me find that for you and I will get that. I'll share a link.
Yeah, and while Joyce finds that, I can say, you know, for a lot of sites, I'm not familiar with the Mount Sinai Beth Israel site, but for a lot of sites that are in commercial districts, those have something in zoning called a residential district equivalent. So, you know, in CV6, there's a number of districts, like, for example, along the water, in the sorry, my screen is dead here. Along the water from like the 40s to the like low 50s. There's a C52 district, you know, which has a residential equivalent of sorry, let me pull it up here. It has a residential equivalent of R10, which is the third highest density residential district you can have. So just because something is zoned for commercial doesn't mean that there can't be residential there as well. So just wanted to put that out there. But yeah, any additional information you can offer about the site, be happy to do some further research or provide more information if you'd like.
Just to kind of follow up on that thread, I'm sure there are a lot of potential sites that, you know, one could develop on. I'm just curious, what's the decision criteria that HPD considers when deciding which sites to actually move forward on and actually build on?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think usually we'll look at, and I'm speaking really broadly, I don't think we have like a very specific rule of thumb, but sites that are large enough to build a building that we would be able to finance. Typically, we look at about 150 as sort of like the bottom of what we'd like to finance, and around 400 units for the top in a single building. So that's usually what we're looking at. Lots that are not irregular, lots that permit residential development, though we also work on taking these sites through public approvals, so we're often doing rezonings. Yeah, I'm sure there's many more criteria, but I think those are sort of the big ones. What we feel like would be feasible in areas where maybe we haven't built before. If we have large swaths of public land, how can we make the best use of those? Things like that.
Yeah,
This is a separate question. You just mentioned in the presentation that the minimum cost to maintain a rent stabilized unit is $1,200. And it is pretty fresh to me. This knowledge is very new for me. And I'm wondering how you calculated this and what is the money spent on?
I think we have the data source, right?
Mm-hmm. Let me pull up the data source. But I will say as I do that, that amount is includes it includes taxes, I believe, and and costs like around fuel. It does not include, debt service if the landlord has a mortgage and is having to pay that. Trying to find the data source here. It comes from the Rent Guidelines annual report, but let me put a pin in that and I'll share it in the chat. Does that sound good?
And maybe we could pull up that slide again, Melanie, if that's helpful.
Steve,
I know you mentioned the Mamdani administration just released the Block by Block report. Part of that in one section talks a little bit about some of the money that comes from the federal government. And I'm wondering, just given what's happening with the federal government funding sources, how much of HPD's pipeline of projects is at risk? And what types of projects are most at risk of not being funded because they depend mostly on these federal dollars?
Yeah, that is a great question. It's definitely come up recently. So as of last fiscal year, HPD received more than 60% of our funds from the federal government. So it has been something we're thinking about as priorities are shifting. I think we don't know what's going to happen next. So we're trying to work. I know the mayor's been trying to work very closely with the state to try and get some more funding from the state, because a very small percentage of our funding actually comes from the state, less than 1%. And the rest of it comes from city tax levy. So we're thinking of creative ways to make sure that we're able to deliver the housing that we're committed to. But yeah, it's definitely a reality that we're grappling with. And I don't want to be too doom and gloom, because nothing has changed too significantly for the projects that we're putting forth, but it is something that I think everyone is keeping in the back of their minds.
Jerry?
Hi again. So I realize this is a massive topic, but one area that we really didn't go into was the intersection of, renewable energy. So I did some work on passive housing. And the Sendero Verde project up in Harlem is an example of a build which is 100% stabilized, affordable, and has passive house, which really does contain the costs and represents a 10% initial investment. So I'm wondering if that is part of the criteria as you were thinking about new projects, and if that can serve as a template.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sendero Verde is a great example. And I visited it a few years ago and was just blown away. I will say a lot of the projects that we're financing, especially on public sites, tend to be passive house and meet that criteria. And I think there's a requirement for all of our projects to meet LEED Gold certification. So that's something that we're definitely thinking about, and any way that we can be putting public money to good use, we tend to do. So our buildings tend to be very resilient and very green. And I'm trying to think now, we just approved Carmen Villegas in East Harlem last year, and that'll be Passive House certified. There's a few other projects that we have in the pipeline that are also pursuing that certification.
Let me call in. Any commitment to retrofitting our many stabilized and poorly looked after buildings with Passive House?
Retrofitting, that's a good question. I think that tends to be a little bit harder. We don't tend to see the preservation side of things too much, so I can definitely get more information for you. But I think they're always also trying to think of ways to make older buildings more green as well. But I can't speak too much to that, but I can get more information.
Thank you.
Eric.
Sure. Hi, just a question on the division of enforcement. So you mentioned obviously one of the important roles is ensuring that, you know, buildings are up to code. I'm actually a property manager, and just a suggestion, like we'll get a violation, I'm gonna read here, that just says paint with light colored paint to the satisfaction of this department, all wall and ceiling in the first room. And you just get a letter. There's no one to call, there's no one to contact, there's no way to kind of like go through a process of understanding what the remedy that the tenant in HPD is seeking. So I guess it's just a suggestion on, you know, with technology we have today, it'd be wonderful if when someone's doing inspection, they could just zoom the person in or take video or just some way to actually clarify what updates are expected. So there's clarity to make the fix, because it just feels like it's like a never-ending loop of no one to communicate with. So that would be wonderful. And then I think beyond that, it would also give the landlord an opportunity to comment, right, on the situation, because usually just the tenant is in the room with the inspector and sort of having the ability to influence, you know, their view of the event. So I think that's secondary, but as a primary thing to actually make the updates, it'd be wonderful to have something documented more than sort of this super vague, you know, note with no one to contact ever.
I will pass that along. I think that's a good suggestion. I guess when these things happen, are you ever in contact directly with the tenant to ask about that as well? Or are you just going through HPD? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's a variety of issues. Sometimes, you know, the tenant doesn't want to communicate, sometimes they do. Like what the expectation actually is from HDB, like you get something like this, just light colored that aligns with, I forget, the light colored paint to the satisfaction of this department.
That's pretty vague. Yeah.
So
Yeah, happy to pass
there's
that suggestion
no one to
along.
call, no one to talk to. So like, it's just difficult because there's no opportunity for dialogue with any of this. So obviously some are clear, some are not.
Thank you for raising that. I will pass that on to our enforcement team.
Yeah, and sorry, just as another note, I mean, just in terms of holes in the process, like, and all in theory that I have to do is go to the HBD website and click, yes, I address this. But it'd probably be great if it was clear what I need to do. I could take a video and send it back and say this was done. As opposed to then the tenant calling and then 4 weeks later, someone coming out. It just seems very inefficient.
Thank you.
Sure.
Amy, did you have a question?
I just, you know, you mentioned the 467 program, which is conversion. And I think in CB6, we have a lot of conversions going on, and we're very curious if any of them actually have affordable housing. It seems very difficult to find this out. And I'm wondering when in the process it's decided that it's going to be affordable.
That's a really good question. I'm certainly not an expert, but I know that there are, for projects that do opt into this program, there is an affordable housing component that's required. So I think there are probably two things happening. There might be private developers who are doing this kind of on their own without opting into the program. But for anybody who's going through the 467M program, they would have to provide affordable housing. And that should be something that we're keeping on our website. But I will find out a little bit more about how we're tracking that and how we're communicating that out to you guys.
John?
One of the things you haven't talked about much are housing vouchers and other ways to support tenants who just can't make their rent.
Yeah, does anyone on my team want to take a stab at that? Okay, I'm happy to answer that too. So HPD, we do issue a small amount of Section 8 vouchers. So that's something that we provide. We also, any of our buildings take Section 8 vouchers as well. So you can, if you're applying to affordable housing through Housing Connect, you can certainly bring your voucher with you, and that's considered part of how you're paying your rent. Were there more specific? I know we also have the City FEPS program, and I'll admit I'm not an expert on that either, but can get some more information for you about that. But were there any specific questions you had about sort of the voucher programs?
Well, I'm wondering if housing vouchers are very hard to come by still, or if they've become harder to come by.
I believe they are harder to come by, just with the cuts to the federal vouchers. Yeah, I don't have more information than that, but I will say we have all these resources and tools that we're trying to use and help tenants and support them throughout the changes in different administrations and changes in policies. And I don't know if that's the most satisfying answer, but that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you.
Shuya has another question.
I would just mention that for some districts, very few new units have been built recently, or very few affordable units have been built recently. And actually, I have heard lots of agencies discuss it, but I hardly hear agencies consider how many existing units we have in this district and how many existing affordable units or rent-stabilized units we have in this district. And it sounds to me like if we don't build the new units, and it sounds like this district is falling behind, but we can't just say this, ignoring that how many existing units we have in this district, such as for Staten and Peter Cooper Village. It is almost impossible to build new units and to bring more rent stabilized units, because right now every unit is rent stabilized. And you can't just say that, okay, this district doesn't add more rent stabilized units in the last 5 years. And it is kind of unfair without considering the current situation.
Yeah, that's a really excellent point. I will say the developments that you mentioned are major benefits to the city and to tenants, and a huge part of what we do is preservation work, as we talked about. So I don't want this to come across as we're only trying to build new units. We definitely do want to continue to preserve the great affordable housing stock that already exists. But we want to be creative if there are opportunities to build new affordable units, trying to figure out where we can build those, just because, especially in Manhattan, there's a lot of limitation around where we can build, how much we can build. But yeah, I don't know if, yeah, go ahead, Audrey.
Yeah, I can also say, I think you might have asked or mentioned it, wanting a count of the rent stabilized units or rent stabilized buildings in each district, and that's something we can certainly find out for you and share. I will also say that, a lot of these, especially since 2024, when the city council approved the City of Yes zoning changes, which made it much easier to build housing, including affordable housing. We're anticipating that there will be affordable housing that maybe flies under the radar a little bit, if that makes sense, because of programs like the universal affordability preference, which applies in high density districts like the ones in this community district. And in that program, developers will get a 20% FAR bonus if they provide units, at least 20% of the floor area goes to units where where households can make up to 60% of the AMI. So that's a deeper level of affordability than maybe some of the other developments that we see with 100% AMI or more. So yeah, so I think we can expect to see more construction as of right construction that takes advantage of zoning bonuses like UAP. So I'll leave it there.
I have a question related to sort of affordable housing and making the number of units publicly available. Something that we've discussed as a committee recently is this idea of a public database that reveals rent stabilized or affordable units that might be coming online or that are currently online, in order to make it easy for tenants and prospective renters to find affordable units that they can sort of live in, right? I understand that there are programs, right, when HPD finances a new housing construction using MIH, there's the website in which you can apply that for the housing lottery that shows the number of new affordable units that one can apply to. But for existing buildings, when a tenant vacates their rent stabilized apartment, it's really unclear to us how that apartment is advertised. So that way, a person in need who can afford to live in that rent stabilized and rent regulated unit can do so, without really having to go through the burden of trying to find ways in which they can live there. So it's something that we've kind of been talking about as a committee recently, is whether or not there is sort of this public warehouse and public database that HPD is willing to sort of, share broadly with the city, so that way prospective renters can find more affordable units than just the ones that are publicly listed in the housing lottery.
That's a really good question. Trying to think about how I want to answer that. I think we are trying to make changes also to Housing Connect, because there's a way, and I can also share more information about this, but I need to look at the website, where you can opt in for re-rentals. That doesn't exactly get to your question, but it'll allow you to sign up for basically not a brand new building, but when an affordable unit becomes vacant in an already existing building, you could get notified of that. And that would be that's something that I'll definitely share. There is open data that shows sort of like the number of new construction units and preservation units. It's not exactly getting to what thanks, Zach just shared that, might be getting at, but we can think about how we can get a list together for you that might be helpful, so you can keep an eye out for where these units might be and folks can apply to those.
I would just adding on to that, I guess, it just sort of like begs the general question when you talked about stabilization. There is no income, as you said, aspect to it, which I guess is the biggest gap in the program, right? Is that, a landlord could rent that to any person they want.
Are you talking about market rate?
What's that?
Are you talking specifically about market rate units?
No, you said rent stabilized units, right? Like, if you wanted to advertise them more broadly, and I think you alluded to the fact that so people in need could have them, but unfortunately those apartments aren't directed at people in need.
Right.
They're just available units that have a restricted rent.
Or I can use like a
There's
personal,
no income.
I can use like a personal anecdote, like a friend of mine who makes 3 times more than what I make is living in a rent stabilized unit because a friend of a friend was able to connect him to that unit. Whereas somebody who is making 25% of the area median income is not able to afford or is not able to live in that unit because they didn't know that that existed, because there was no publicly accessible information for them to find that. And the reason why my friend was able to get that is because he heard secondhand. And another thing too, with the housing lottery, is I know a few people who applied to live in a rent stabilized unit through the housing lottery, have gotten accepted, were able to live there because their income qualified because they were in that band, but then they got a pay raise 2 years later, and now they wouldn't qualify because their income exceeds what they would have previously needed in order to live there, right? So it isn't necessarily about, you know, this, I guess my criticism here is not to sort of change the system. We need more affordable housing, we need more affordable units. It's how can we ensure that the affordable units that are available and the ones that come online in the future go to the people in need most. And so one of the things, as I mentioned before, is we're thinking about sort of ways in which that information can be publicly available and accessible for people truly in need.
Yeah, I think that's a really excellent point. We definitely want to be better and more transparent about how folks can get into these units. And we know that rents at the lowest end of the income bracket are usually have the lowest vacancy rates because people are more interested in them because it's cheaper rent. I guess I'll just say, folks of, I don't know, rent stabilization is meant to protect tenants. And just because you make more doesn't mean people should be kicked out necessarily. Like ideally, you're not paying 30% of your income, you're paying quite a bit less than that and can live comfortably in the city. That being said, we do want folks of all income levels to be able to afford to live here. So I hear what you're saying about wanting to be more transparent, and I think that's definitely something that we can pass along. But I don't know. We don't want to be kicking people out of their apartments either.
No, of course not. Yeah, and I don't think the solution is to do that either, right? I think the solution is that we need more housing, we need more affordable housing, and in a perfect world, we'd have enough to provide for everyone, but unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way. Jerry,
Sorry.
Oh, if you're gonna say
if you
something.
had another point, Joy, sorry, I cut you off.
Oh, sorry, just a quick add-on, and Joy,
Sure.
like, correct me if I'm wrong, but for you know, for most rent stabilized apartments, like for example, I live in a rent stabilized apartment, but it's not through HPD, it's just because it's an old building, you know, with 6 or more units, right? That rent stabilization is administered through a state agency. And so an HPD has a role in and Joy, I love if you could speak to it, but there's a state and a city aspect to this. And so HPD is, you know, not involved in every rent stabilized apartment or regulating that. Just for clarification.
Gotcha.
That's true too.
Jerry, you had a question?
Yeah, so hi. My follow-up was a macro point about the lottery. As you may know, at least 1 in 5 New Yorkers is a freelancer. And what I experienced when I went up for the lottery years ago was an asymmetry, whereas they were looking at something like a look back of income for 6 months, it was 2 years for freelancers. And I would just recommend bringing this up to the 21st century and recognizing how people make their living.
Yeah, I'm happy to pass that along. I think they have made changes to the documents that we require for freelancers. But I think that's a fair point because not everybody works a 9 to 5. So happy to pass that along to our team.
Great. And then last question from Samir.
Yeah, you mentioned ELERP, and I'm curious, I know it's pretty early days with that mechanism, but I'm curious for projects that need zoning changes, what percentage, like even a rough number would be interesting to know of projects qualify for ELERP versus like the old, longer ELERP process?
I wish I had that number. It is really early. We just certified or started our first ELERP in the Bronx, and I think it's already completed. So really a little too soon to say, but I think we're hoping that a good chunk of those could be ELERPs and go through a little bit faster. But I don't have numbers right now.
Great. Thank you. I think that's everything from us this evening, unless anybody has any other questions. No, and I think we touched on some of the questions that we shared previously, HPD, but if there are any that you think you have some additional information to share with us, we'd be more than happy to hear.
Zach, do you want to take any of those on that you think we might have missed? Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I'm combing through it right now. No, I'm combing through it right now to see. So I know we had a question about legislation that we supported at the city or state level. Kind of high level, we do support pretty much any legislation that assists our agency in some of the core goals, whether that be creating additional efficiencies or streamlining the development process. But if you want a specific example, we do have Intro 66 at the state level right now. This is legislation that would permit the creation of shared housing and new Class A multiple dwellings and establish a design and operational requirement for those units. So we are kind of pushing it at multiple levels, same way any kind of public entity would.
And I think there was also an interesting question about if HB has evaluated community land trusts. So just wanted to say that we've provided financing or we're in the pre-development phase for more than 1,200 units of affordable housing through CLTs, a few of which are actually in Manhattan. So we've worked with the Cooper Square Community Land Trust. We worked with the El Barrio Community Land Trust uptown on developing housing with them. And it's something we're definitely thinking about often. We now require 25% of ownership for any development teams applying to RFPs to be either a nonprofit or an MWBE, a minority or woman-owned business enterprise. And that could include CLTs and nonprofits as well. So we're definitely thinking about ways to work with CLTs. We also provide technical assistance and capacity building for CLTs as well. And we have a whole team that just does work with CLTs. So definitely something we're thinking about.
Great. Thank you. So seeing no further questions or comments, we really appreciate you being here this evening. As you mentioned before, if you can share with us this presentation, we can post it on our website so that way future members can see it. And I'm sure we'll continue to be in touch as we talk about more housing and affordable housing in the community district. So we really look forward to it.
Sounds good. Yeah, we have some follow-ups for you, but happy to stay in touch. Let us know if you have any more questions.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Take care.
Okay. That was great. So then moving along to Steve, yes.
Just one quick follow-up. I didn't bring it up for, and I didn't want to pull them into this whole discussion, but since you brought up MBSI, I'm not clear because I thought MBSI was a privately owned one. Am I not correct?
I think it is.
It is, but it's owned by a not-for-profit.
Yeah, I mean, I was
Right, but
Googling that
It's
as
privately owned, so they have as of right use and they can do whatever they want.
Right, right.
They can build a luxury, purely ultra luxury housing if they want to.
And I think the question was because even with some of these like commercial to housing conversions, they don't really need to provide affordable housing, right? And so they didn't fully answer our question because they're not locked into any affordable housing programs, but the one that they did share with us is sort of like a tax incentive program that developers can opt into.
Right, but like, given the location of that site, why would any developer want to do that when they can build,
if the
$5 million
developers in the business of doing it.
And who is the private owner? It's not the. Hospital, that's what I meant, okay, the
But-
I meant, it's like.
Why
a-
they want, why
Yes,
did they
yes.
close it and
Yeah.
what, because that real
No, no, I
estate
meant
is
they're
so
gonna, I
valuable.
figured they're gonna sell it.
They're gonna sell it
They'll
on the high,
sell,
but
that's why I was
to
asking.
build the most luxury
Yes.
housing.
But I mean,
They'll
we
sell it.
could have, and we haven't done it before, we could prevent that. I mean, the way that St. Vincent's went didn't have to be, and of course, it's just mind-boggling that you would take a hospital that served tens of thousands of people and basically redirect it for housing for 100 people. And this would be approximately 250 to 300 people.
Has there been a resolution passed in the land use committee about affordable housing for this site?
Oh, yeah, I mean, we're trying whatever we can to, but as Stephen pointed out,
Eminent
they
domain.
closed the hospital, we tried very hard to keep the hospital open.
Right.
It was a very long, torturous process,
Mhm.
and we're trying to do whatever we can to influence what goes there, but it's.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like the solo site, right?
Right.
It's a big empty lot, privately owned. What can we do?
Yeah.
Well, it
Literally
screams
nothing,
out since
unless
we
you want to
have
start out
nothing in the
private
community.
land, Seizing, government seize private lands, you know.
You start taxing them. you just-
Yeah.
Instead of giving them breaks.
Need a hospital path.
I mean, HPD did say that they would look into it and get back to us, so I think maybe we can just continue to get in touch with them.
I mean, the thing is, it is a not-for-profit, so if they sell it for a profit, there should be some, I mean, logically, there should be some.
They just pay their executives $2 million a year. It's enough.
I mean, it just means they don't have shareholders, that's all that is. They can do whatever they want with their money.
They benefited from a lack of taxing for many years
As a nonprofit.
as a.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I mean, it feels like the city council could show some leadership.
well, as much as we could talk about this all night, there might be another presentation in the future. So then moving on to the next agenda item, the continued discussion of the fiscal year 2028 statement of district needs for housing, land use, and economic development. So Brian, if you don't mind pulling it up.
Sure. Yeah, so I circulated to the committee, Steve's, proposed narrative.
Yeah, actually, we discussed it in about the narratives and we decided to add 2 sentences in the first paragraph.
So you're referring to,
Steve's language.
You have to go down to the new link, this is all, this is all the whereas, this was all there before. And then you add at the very bottom, the new.
Oh, I see.
Well. Yeah, you can see that.
That's me.
Might be easier, you can read it for the whole committee to hear and then.
He has.
What line, you know, the line.
In other words, this is what he said.
Well, it is
Oh,
after
that's-
the Roberts cases, the price for Roberts units are much closer to market rate. It is after this sentence. We want to add 2 sentences. Well, this is reflected in the near doubling of median household incomes.
household incomes.
Yeah, between 2010 and 2024. From $88,400 to 153 and to $153,280 in Stuytown.
Just Stuytown or Stuytown period?
Stuytown, the next one will be Peter.
Oh, okay.
And $102,353. To $202,600 in Peter Cooper Village. And the next sentence will be furthermore, the agreement covering 5,000 affordable units expires in 2035. With the end of Blackstone's ownership. And that's it.
Great. Looks great, guys. So is the process now to vote on this?
Yeah, so we can take a roll call
Okay.
vote to adopt it.
Okay, and then I'll also make one note at last month's land use committee meeting, because the land use committee also elected to have the same affordable housing criteria for their district needs statement. When we vote on this, it will then go to the land use committee, will then also vote on this as well, so it's gonna be kind of like a joint thing. So hopefully they don't have any changes. I will urge them not to, because I don't think we wanna have to vote on it again in the fall. Yeah, I know, right? So,
Because last week, we made a clarification about the Stuytown and Peter Cooper Village affordable housing conditions. And then we made the clarification with the people who live there and with the tenants association, and we got more information, and that's why we added this sentence.
I think it looks great. I
Yeah.
think it adds a lot of clarity to it.
Yeah.
So if there are no objections, let's take a vote on this.
So do we have a motion in a second or?
Motion to vote.
Seconded.
Okay, good.
So, committee members, I'll, call your name, when you hear your name, please respond in favor, opposed, abstain, or abstain for cause not assigned. Joan Beck,
In favor.
thank you. Liz Burr,
In favor.
Eric Goldberg,
In favor.
Sandra Leftoff is not with us this evening. Alec Militek,
In favor.
Rich Smith.
In favor.
Thank you. Steve Perez.
In favor.
Denise Canada.
In favor.
James Vera.
In favor.
Jerry Weinstein.
In favor.
And Shu Yazell.
In favor.
Thank you. So it's unanimous,
Great.
with 10 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstaining, and 0 abstaining.
Can we get one?
Yeah, should I call that?
Great. Thanks, Brian. Thank you, everyone. Great. So if there's no further discussions, we can move on to the chair's report. I shared with, or rather I asked the board office to share last week, the mayor's block by block report, which HPD also mentioned. I think it's a really great resource. Everyone should read it. And as they alluded to, as HPD alluded to, it sounds like they're identifying some public sites, which was also alluded to in the block by block report. That might be identified for affordable housing in the future. So this being the last committee meeting before the fall, I think it's something that we can monitor, and I can let everyone know if there's any sites that they identify within our community district. That might be noteworthy, and we can have a discussion about. So yeah, I encourage everyone to read this. I think it's great. It's really well thought out and pretty in depth. old and new business, is there any business? Steve?
Not new business really, but just something that occurred to me as we were doing our project with Shreya and Sandra and Liz and working through all the numbers. It was maybe shocking, but maybe not so shocking that, you know, only 24% or less of our housing in the district is actually affordable. And while I, appreciate everything that we've done to try to push that, and we're always pushing for affordable housing. There are a lot of other housing issues that probably aren't related to just affordable housing, and haven't really addressed 75% of the housing that does exist in our district. Not that we're ignoring it, but I'm just saying, like, as we think about other things that the committee should be focusing on, I mean, there's a lot of other probably issues that are affecting constituents who live in the district that frankly, nobody lives in affordable housing, so.
Right.
Yeah, I can imagine accessibility, since we had so much discussion around that, and transportation. That we begin to look at that, especially for people who are aging in place.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Steve. And that's something that I think we haven't really done.
I just like to point out, because a lot of people own co-ops in this district, and they are becoming unaffordable.
It's gonna raise that point, yeah, the maintenance, yeah.
Maintenance and insurance, and I know the budget committee. It's a big problem. People think we're a rich district, but, we're just trying to be middle class.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Steve. I think what we can do over the summer maybe is collaborate on other ways in which we can explore ways that we can advocate for not just affordable housing, but the other kinds of housing that exist here, as well as other homelessness and shelter issues and aging in place issues. So thanks for bringing that up.
I would suggest, since I looked at that we maybe in the fall explore how, from a data perspective, how that is hitting people with regards to that component, owners, maintenance and insurance. Because what it made me think of in real time was how a friend of mine was a bankruptcy lawyer and started this whole nonprofit in Crown Heights because of deed theft. That's the end of a very long journey, where if you can't afford, you're going to give it up or you're going to be swindled into it. But if this is, as I've been hearing, 5 years on from now, if there isn't relief, people will begin to be unable to afford their places.
Great points. Okay, so seeing no other old news or business. If there are no objections, we will adjourn the meeting at 8 o'clock. Thanks, everyone.